one of the key pieces of infrastructure as we actually get into food system transformation is the National Good Food Nation Plan. And we have that now, finalised and published just before Christmas last year. And the whole system of a food system transformation that legislators chose is based on the system of plans. So we have a national plan, and then in the future, as Jane's just mentioned, we're going to have upwards of 40 local plans. So top-down, bottom-up is the way that the core of the legislation works. And there's much, much more beyond that core will be happening. But at the core are these plans. So what we have of tangible is the first National Good Food Plan. And what we're going to do now is just have a few minutes to reflect on the first National Good Food Nation Plan. And I'm really pleased we've got a cracking panel. So if I could invite panel members to come up, please, and we'll take a few minutes to explore where we've got to with this first national plan. I'm really pleased to welcome Mary, who you've already met. In addition, two people from the world of relevant authorities, Dr. Ruth Campbell, consultant dietitian, and in public health at NHS Ayrshire and Arran. Jen, sat beside Mary, Jen Kerr, Community Engagement Manager, South Lanarkshire Council, and at the far end, Lisa Novak, Senior Policy Officer, Good Food Nation, the Scottish Government. So one of the authors, as it were, of the report. So we'll get into what the report means. And I wonder if we could kick off, Mary, one for you. Now that the National Good Food Nation Plan has been written, what can we expect to happen next?
Well, thank you very much, Dennis. I mean, I think first of all, we need to celebrate getting to this point and the huge amount of work that has gone into it. I think then as a commission, we are going to have to get to work with scrutinising that plan as we also evolve and create the organisation as Jane was outlining. One of the things I forgot earlier on was to acknowledge the Living Good Food Nation Lab that I lead at the University of Edinburgh, and many of the staff and partners are here today. And I think the lab has been holding the fort a little bit over the last few years to help to support local authorities and health boards with what they're being asked to do. And I think at the heart of it, what has been central to me is about meeting each and every relevant authority where they are at, trying to understand what food means to them and their communities, and supporting them in developing what essentially is going to be a very long book of 46 chapters that tells us about food in Scotland and what it means to each and every community. And I think that is the heart of what we will be doing over the next few years, is to really navigate and interrogate and understand what food means to Scotland, and how collectively we can understand what we have in common, where we need to be different, and how we can celebrate our different geographies, our different communities, our different resources, whilst driving forward with a common direction of travel to deliver that fairer, healthier, more sustainable food system for all.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Lisa, thinking about the role of the government in this next stage, what's the government going to be doing in terms of bringing this plan to life over the coming months and years?
Thanks, Dennis. So our main focus at the moment is twofold, really. So one is building the awareness of Good Food Nation within Scottish Government, and a huge part of that has already happened through the drafting of the plan. But there's still work to be doing there to just really embed Good Food Nation thinking and make our colleagues understand the challenges of food systems thinking and apply that to their policy areas. And that work will be ongoing, but there's lots that we are doing in that context. And then the second thing, of course, is our work with relevant authorities and building the support that Scottish Government can give to them. And there's a few things that are currently happening, which is we are running a few workshops, we are engaging individually with relevant authorities, but we've also set up a knowledge hub now to create a space online for relevant authorities to engage with each other. But that piece of internal engagement should not be underestimated, because it's really about breaking down those silos, building connections across portfolios, and that will ensure that we are able to deliver on a Good for Nation as the Scottish Government.
Thanks. Lisa, Ruth first, and then Jen. What does it mean for you now that the national plan has been published in terms of what how you think about it within the health board, within a local authority?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for the invitation to be on the panel. So as a token NHS representative, I'm feeling slightly under pressure to say something sensible from an NHS perspective, so I hope I don't let all my colleagues down. So our approach in Ayrshire has been to get out of the starting blocks early. So I was in touch with Mary and her team a number of months ago, and in fact, last July, our colleagues facilitated a workshop that we had locally where I had brought together some of the key partners from across NHS Ayrshire and Arran that would have definitely a role to play in the development of our local plan. I've also had some conversations with our local authorities in Ayrshire. So we've got 3 local authorities, so there'll be 4 plans in the book coming from Ayrshire. But obviously we've made a commitment that we will work together as far as possible. So each of our relevant authorities have either taken a paper or are about to take a paper to our respective decision-making authorities, either our corporate management team or cabinet, for approval to work together. So there is that commitment to work towards sharing an outcomes framework, and my chief executive certainly has pushed for us to have as many shared actions as possible. So that's the approach that we've taken up until this point.
So this is interesting. We're just a little bit more on that. So the idea of 46 relevant authorities working away in isolation is probably unlikely to be the way that it actually happens. You were describing something much more connected.
We're trying to be collaborative.
Yeah.
For a region the size of Ayrshire, I think we need to take that approach, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Jen, how's it looking in South Lanarkshire?
Hi, thanks as well for the invitation to join you today. It's looking like it's getting more and broader and broader and broader. So I'm a community planning manager. So I was the natural health systems, you know all the partners. You guys are focused on poverty, inequality, and access to food. But actually, as we've started to develop in all corners of the food system, each person we've talked to along the way has said to us, we need to meet the others, we need to connect with others, and actually we've needed to do this for a while. So I think that there's a need actually for this, and it's the right time to start to bring different parts of the sectors together, and we're finding that more and more. I work obviously in the area of food poverty and food in access to food and how that affects someone's health throughout their lifespan. We're a Marmot area, one of the pilots, and we can absolutely see how people's life chances, where they start, how they grow, what they eat, where they're employed, and all across their lifespan, how that's affecting their health and also their ability to live a healthy life because of the types of food they can eat and its contribution to more disease in middle life. Obesity in children is a significant issue for us, and so is the fact that we can see food banks rising exponentially across the last 3 years, but while that's starting to ease finally, it's not easing for families. So children's food choices are being determined by our economy, and so that's where we start to see the connections coming in. We're also very urban and a very rural council area. We've got significant differences of lands and space and a huge chain of food to bring together. So we're really finding as we start to gather people and gather people together and ask them to start to think about this, that our group is getting wider and wider and wider. And even yesterday contacted our resilience planner because of the crisis around the world and the impact that that could have on food security locally. So every day or every week, every time we make a foray into it, I would just say that the complexity of the system is what we're learning and looking forward to trying to bring together as much as we can.
Thanks, Jen. You mentioned in passing there Marmot. Could you just very briefly summarise what being a Marmot place means?
Yes, for us it means taking action on the inequalities and the gap in inequalities between the haves and the have-nots in our society. So we come across in the middle always in South Lanarkshire. We have a lot of well-off people and a lot of deprivation, but it's all hidden. It's all hidden in data zones and things. So, but when we start to look at, say child poverty, for example, we're just under the national average. But when we drill down into our neighbourhoods and into our streets, we have some at 40 and 35%. We have almost a third of our children living in poverty and others with 2%. That has significant difference for how people, not only what kind of food they can access, but what they can afford to cook. And that is shaping children's future tastes and palates. And we recognise that that's going to then sit with them and go with them the rest of their lives.
Thank you. Lisa, coming back to you, just a couple of questions around the future mechanics of things. So Jane just mentioned about Section 10 and timescale for Section 10, which probably is of limited meaning to some people in the room. Do you want to just explain what's planned around what is Section 10, what switching it on means, and what the time scale is that we're hoping to operate Section 10 switch on?
Absolutely. So Section 10 is basically the section of the Good Food Nation Act that commences a 12-month clock for relevant authorities to be drafting their Good Food Nation plans. And our current intention is for this section to commence on the 1st of April 2027. And this then means that plans will have to be produced by the 1st of April 2028. Now, this, I should caveat, is all dependent on any ministerial decisions following the elections. So this timeline might change, but at the moment, we are planning towards this 1st of April 2028 timeline. In essence, that gives relevant authorities 24 months in total to draft the plans, which we know was the feedback that we have received from many of you, that 12 months is just not enough. And based on our own experience of drafting the national plan, we have also realized that 12 months is a very short timescale, in particular when you're dealing with challenging sign-off mechanisms that most public sector organizations are dealing with. So that is the current plan.
Okay, good, thanks. And one other technical point, and I think I might pass to Mary just for full involvement of the panel. There's secondary legislation associated with the Act. Mary, what's the purpose of that secondary legislation, and what's it look like, and when do we think that is going to be enacted?
Policy nerd Brendan gets to come out to play. So the secondary legislation is associated with a novel sort of legislative mechanism or provision that was made in the Good Food Nation Act to try and ensure that there is a much more holistic regard function for the Good Food Nation Act across government and across Parliament, so that it is touching on and being asked to, well, other areas, whether it's agriculture, education, public health, many other areas. I think there are 17 areas that it touches on, are having regard for the Good Food Nation Act, and in particular the National Good Food Nation Plan. That secondary legislation was laid before Parliament in late 2025, though has had a bit of a bumpy ride and is due to be revised and will be relayed before Parliament, we expect, in the autumn of 2026, once the new Parliament has been established. This mechanism is novel, but it's really important because it allows both the Scottish Government and the Good Food Nation team in particular to really be able to drive those changes in culture and changes in working practice and ensure that the allied policy areas and legislation are having regard, or at least are having regard for the Good Food Nation Act. It also allows, and the National Plan, it also allows us as a Commission to be really able to interrogate that regard function and to be able to critique and make recommendations about how those ways of working and ways of regarding the interconnectedness and the interdependency of food across multiple portfolios. So while it is technical, it is also a hugely important mechanism, I believe, to really help in the long term drive the cultural and working changes that we need, not only within government and parliament, but across our relevant authorities and into our communities, and making food more explicit. Currently, food is more implicit than explicit, and I strongly believe that this secondary legislation and the mechanism underpinning it, the specified functions and descriptions, is something that will be really powerful going forward, both for us as a Commission, but also in evolving the way of working within government and how government and Parliament can learn about how to drive systems change for complex, interconnected wicked challenges that are not only about food, but very often are impacted by or impact food.
Thank you, Mary. Good. We've run over time a little bit. I just have one final question for Lisa, Ruth and Jen, because Mary, I think, has already answered it. And that would be, what are your hopes and ambitions as we begin this next chapter of Scotland's Good Food Nation journey? Jen, do you want to go?
I hope it becomes more of a movement than just a policy.
Thank you. Ruth?
I don't really want to be a Debbie Downer, but it's really difficult to see how this is going to work in the current financial climate, I have to say. So my hope would be that we can find ways to come up with things that we do that make a difference, but we still need to push for adequate resource for it actually to happen.
Thank you for that note of realism, Ruth. Absolutely crucial.
I recognise the financial challenges. They are everywhere in the public sector. But yeah, for me, short term, I would say I want to see policy colleagues across Scottish Government coming to us and talk about Good Food Nation and ask us how can they make Good Food Nation work in the policy area. That's short term. Long term, I want us to see achieve the Good Food Nation outcomes, but that's obviously going to take many iterations of the Good Food Nation plan. I don't think it will be by the first iteration.
Yeah, good. Okay. Thank you very much. Please show your appreciation to the panel. Thanks, everybody.